All right, good evening, everyone. We'll call the regular or special council meeting for Monday, June 11th to order. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Ladysmith people. And with that, we'll call the meeting to order. City Manager, before we adopt the agenda, is there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Your Worship. If you can please remove item 5.1 from the agenda, we're going to put that in June 18th.
So some council members do not have the back page, actually, so they're missing items from 4.2 to item 7 in the agenda packages.
Oh.
So remove item 5.1, the voting assent bylaw.
Yeah, election and assent voting bylaw 1964.
I'll need it as well so I can. So we just need that. Do you have that? Do you have that page? No, so none of us have that page. Oh, not tonight. Councillor Patterson, use your microphone.
Under new business, Habitat for Humanity.
Would that be more appropriate for this meeting or municipal services?
I'll let you put it where you think it works best.
Let's put that on municipal services if it's, as they call, a green banana. So I still need to get a page that I can go from to run the meeting. Sorry, if I can just see it like that, Steve, that'd be great. Thanks. So we'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 5.1. Councillor Arnett and Councillor Patterson, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Minutes 2.1 from the regular council meeting held May 7th. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Fraden. Discussion? Councillor... I was going to say Carol, sorry. Councillor Henderson.
I was hoping if the item on bollards on First Avenue on page 9 of the minutes could be reconsidered at a future time.
Yep, I will have a conversation with the city manager and we'll get it on an upcoming agenda. Thank you. Any further discussion on the minutes? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to delegations. Abraham Fraser from the Sonic the Hedgehog film, the location manager. Welcome. It's up to you. I'm not sure if the staff would rather you take the podium or at the table, whatever feels most comfortable for you.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name's Abraham Fraser. I'm the location manager representing Paramount Pictures. We'd have searched all over BC and have chosen Ladysmith as our hero town for our movie. I'd like to give you guys some information on what we'd like to do in your town. We're currently formulating our creative approach to the town, but right now our goal is to film between Roberts and Gattaker on First Avenue. Starting approximately September 19th and going until around the 30th. Now we have about 8 days in there of filming, with about 5 or 6 of those actually occurring at night. So they would, sort of go from 6 p.m. until 6 or 7 a.m. For the majority of our filming, we would require to close the block entirely from Roberts to Gattaker, with the hopes of doing intermittent traffic control up Gattaker and First, sort of keeping that loop going. Just to give you a little bit of a brief description of our movie, it's Sonic is a video game character, is an alien, and the story is kind of a la E.T. in the sense of a small town coming together to help the sheriff save our alien from the bad guys, which are the government chasing them. So it's very heartwarming, and I think it'll be a big hit. I've made a lot of big movies that I can't have my kids see. This is one that I'm really excited about for the content of it. And I think that it'll really bring the town together. There's quite a few things we'd like to do to the town, some painting, we'd like to make that frame shop into a police station, and the little dress shop right beside it into a donut store. And so, I'm attempting to try and get as much communication going as early as possible in what our intentions are, knowing that everything we do in film seems to change daily. And so I'm hoping to sort of put notices out of what our intents are every month or every couple of weeks, that type of thing. I'm not sure what else to tell you at this particular moment in time. We plan on having 150 crew that we're bringing over from Vancouver. We're filling all the hotels. We, of course, will be compensating everyone on the block that we cause any loss of business to. Many of the businesses on that block will actually end up becoming locations where we'll actually have an agreement and pay them directly as a location as opposed to just loss of business. We plan on hiring as many locals as possible. Certainly my department can hire many production assistants and security personnel. We'll be attempting to, for our catering and our craft service, be buying from the bakery and from the meat shop, and just trying to bring it all into town as much as possible.
Great. So what I would do then is open up for questions from council, if that's good for you.
Yeah, that's good.
So I've got Councillor Arnett.
Well, first of all, Sonic is something that my boys grew up on, so it's great to know that it's a family kind of movie that's being made.
Great.
For a while, we've had movies in town. It's not for a long time, but and the whole notion of film industry as an economic driver is one that's been touted for many years up and down the island. You've answered the question partially, and that really is that you're making a film. It's your business, and you're minimizing to the best of your ability the impact on local business. And so as council, or as a council member myself, my interest would be to welcome you and support you being here, because I think it is a great exposure for the town and great economic benefit, as long as it's not at the expense of small business on First Avenue, and you say that you have a number of things in place with that. Is there any feedback that you're getting, and that's leading to my question, from any businesses, without naming them, that they're maybe not on board with it, that they're not, that they're a bit concerned, and is there anything that we can help both them and you around that? Thanks.
So far, all of my discussions have been very positive. I didn't hit every owner on my last trip here. I think I got about at least 80%. They told me some stories of past experiences that make it challenging for me to go in after. And I've heard those things in many places I've gone. I mean, this is Paramount. It's not a small company, and Paramount can't really afford that negative publicity. And I don't live on the island, but I have in the past, and I still look at all of BC as my backyard, and that's more important to me than Paramount or Netflix or any other companies that I work with. They'll go away. I need to return, so I'm going to make sure that everything I tell the community is going to happen to the best of my ability. I certainly don't feel as any small business should be funding a feature film, and so if they're losing money, we have to compensate them for that. There's often challenges when a movie comes in where some businesses will ask for more than they should, and so that we have a forum that kind of shows us how much of a loss of business you've had, and we compensate. My approach often is to do gift certificates, to try and purchase as much from a business in advance as possible, but that I can distribute elsewhere in the town. But I've allotted a very large amount of money in buyouts and location fees to be in the town for a week and a half.
Thank you. It's welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Henderson next.
I'm just thinking of the utility vehicles and all the support items that you might have to have with you, and if you've scoped out enough parking for those larger vehicles.
It's a bit challenging. Most of our vehicles have to be level, and so I've walked the alleys about 4 or 5 times now, trying to figure out how we can do it with the least amount of impact. And I think that, there's going to be certain businesses like a pharmacy that's going to have customers that are not as able as others to get to the door. And I've just talked to the manager today about trying to come up with a way when we're taking so much parking, how do we get those customers their prescriptions, things like that. I've talked to him about valet service, a delivery service, anything that we can do to help out. But I do feel as though when walking around that we're going to ask the city for parking. I'm going to say it's west of First. Yeah, in between Second and First there's a couple of areas where I'd like to run some work trucks, but we have, what I'm going to need to do is put that all on a map when I have a list of all of my work trucks and where the generators can go and what private parking I can get my hands on without taking city parking, because already we're going to be taking a fair amount of First Avenue, which is all for pitcher, and we need to hold that continuity. So by closing the street, we need to control the parking as well. But none of my trucks can be on the steep hills. So the majority of the steep hills will stay vacant for the merchants, customers, whatnot, to park on. But it will be something I'll be coming to city asking for as much of that as I can get. However, our big hair, makeup, wardrobe trucks and all of our crew will be well off-site. I drove down today to the park, and there's a nice gravel lot on one side. I was thinking of putting our hair, makeup trucks there, with Circus being, or crew cars, 150 crew cars out of the town somewhere. Haven't really landed all the parking yet. Sorry, I can't answer that question entirely.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple, and you, Councillor Arnett had part of his question was compensation. I was going to ask, do you have a formula for compensation? You kind of touched on that.
Yeah, and I can forward over to you. It's on the BC Film Commission website. It basically sort of shows what a business had made a year ago during that same time period. If a business hasn't been around for a year, we'll figure something out. But it kind of shows, okay, for these 4 days each day I made $1,000. On the days that you were there I only made $500. But we often don't pay that full $500 because if say it's a restaurant, they haven't lost that merchandise, or any kind of store, they haven't lost that. So we probably pay maybe $350 or $400 of that $500. There is a formula.
Okay, so you're closing First Avenue from the 19th to the 30th?
Yeah, but like I said, probably 5 or 6 of those days will be at night.
So First Avenue will be open again?
During the day, yeah.
Okay, so it's not those 11 days aren't all going to be totally closed?
No, what I have right now is sort of a 7 till 7:30 on the 19th. I have a 2 p.m. till 2:30 a.m. on the 20th and 21st. And then the 24th on, I go from 5 p.m. on to sort of 6 a.m., that type of time frame. Now that's probably going to shift a little bit. I do anticipate those 5 p.m.s will probably shift closer to a 6 p.m. And then, of course, we have some weather cover issues. Within those sort of 5 or 6 days, if we hit inclement weather, we run inside. We've got 2 interior locations we'd like to film here. One is the Ladysmith Inn, and that would be a day of filming in there. And then we have the frame shop, hopefully, which will be our interior police station, and we would go in there for a day. So our closures would shift a little bit if that was to happen. But that will all become a little bit more clear as I get a better structure from my assistant director.
And just one other, is it really a hedgehog? I'm not familiar, I've never played video games.
I had to Google it myself, but he's a little blue video game character, and I did have a picture of him on here at one point.
Well, I can Google it.
Yeah, yeah. He's a cutie.
Okay.
There'll be a tearjerker moment, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchins.
No, absolutely not. I think that we come to an agreement. You know, we certainly don't want to walk away from the town with anyone disgruntled. So again, you know, if I've got a merchant who's uncomfortable with waiting until after the fact, I'm happy to cut a reasonable deal in advance, knowing that that actually may increase afterwards if their loss was more than that. I do feel as though that that one block is not that many businesses, and in our, you know, just to give you an example, I've budgeted $300,000 in for 8 days of loss of business. So I feel like I'm pretty covered in there. Yep, fair enough. And they will be. Yeah, there will be times where, like, I mean, if we're doing ITC on another section of First Avenue, they're definitely going to see an impact. Gattaker is going to see an impact. High Street will see an impact, and Robert Street will see an impact. I'm thinking the whole town for sure. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Arnett.
I just wanted to ask this question with respect to location. The island has, I had some involvement with the Film Commission folks there for a while, especially when the days were a bit better. And so locations are in competition as well. So it's, for us to have been chosen is on the basis of how it fits with your film and a variety of other things. But I think it's important to note that it's not like you're forced to be here. You've chosen us, probably amongst 3 or 4 somewhat similar locations, I would expect, for the film.
Yep.
And I just wonder if you could give us a couple of references as to why, if there were 3 or 4 of them, you chose us. I think it's good for the town.
Well, it was, from what I understand, the town was chosen before I started. And it was the director and the production designer that, you know, designer comes over first and then he pitches the town to the director. It made it all the way up to our studio head and our producer Neil Moritz, who does all the Fast and Furious movies, who I think really probably had the final say. Mr. Moritz probably said, yes, I'm sold on that town.
Hi, my name is Joan Miller. I'm the film commissioner actually for the region. So thank you everyone for spending the time to answer this. We are the Vancouver Island North Film Commission, and we had been previously in the Nanaimo North with large area. But since the changes that happened in the Cowichan Region District, we offered our services, so we've been trying to support them while they're determining what direction they're going to go in. So I was actually on this project before Abe came on. And so originally we were sending files. So they had asked us for images of small towns. So we actually, our job is to send them everything we have. They make the decisions based on particular creative decisions. So we sent packages for quite a while. We ended up getting to the point where we got a phone call. I spent time with the production designer and with one of the producers, and we drove from one end to the other. So we went in and out of Cumberland, Comox. We ended up here at Ladysmith. So it's a creative decision, but what's nice about this is there's other locations that are benefiting from this. So Ladysmith becomes the hero town because it met the creative needs of it, but there's all other parts of the region are going to benefit with other locations. So the fact that we could put a bigger package together for them when they're going to come over and bring everyone, and they could find more than just one location, was a real bonus for them as well. So we are now trying to do our best to expand the services and support. Ladysmith, we've always thought, is an amazing gold mine, and having a company like you said, Paramount, it's a big difference dealing with them than it is dealing with some of the independents. Not to say that they aren't really good, but when they come in, we would be watching over every move that they make and making sure that what Abe does automatically, sometimes on a smaller production, they're not as heavily sourced as what Abe's doing. So we work with them in the future as well to make sure that what happened to you in the past, we would try not to have it happen to you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnett, follow up.
So thank you. That's what I was looking for. I think it's important that people understand that this is a huge, complicated business decision, and that it speaks well of our town that you chose us. Thanks.
I don't think I have anyone else on my speakers list, so I wanted to thank you for coming and all the work you've done up until now to get to this point. And for those that don't know, because I do, because I was a Sega kid, not a Nintendo kid, Sonic the Hedgehog is like Sega's Mario Brothers, so it's the #1 property that the Sega brand has, and I think that was multiple hundreds of millions of dollars were actually put forward to get that license to be able to make those movies, so it's a very valuable property, and I understand, at least from what I read, and this was actually in Forbes magazine about this movie, was it's targeted for a holiday release next year.
That's right, November 19th.
So you know, it's another good time for a holiday movie release. It's a high budget live action CGI, and unlike, you know, which was mentioned, alluded to at least by Joan, this is not a Sci-Fi Network independent or Hallmark movie production, cable television. That this is Paramount, and it's a big budget, you know, holiday action family adventure movie kind of thing. So just because I was trying to close, Councillor Patterson put his hand up.
Just a quick, is there a chance that we could get this Sonic Hedgehog for our summer parade, Ladysmith parade?
I will work on that, absolutely.
Yeah, that would actually.
It'd be really
All right. One other note on Joan mentioning that we have another location on the island. We're coming over 5 days up island and about 8 days, 9 days here, or maybe 11. We're estimating around $10 million that we'll infuse to the island, and my feeling is that's probably closer to 6 or 7 this side versus 4 up north. Give you an idea of our budget.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great.
And I don't see any further hands, so I will thank you and look forward to moving forward.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on. Everybody's excitement died down. We can get down to more serious business. The next item on our agenda is the Water Filtration Plant Award, pages 16 through 18. And we do have a recommendation that Council award the water filtration plant tender to NAC Construction Limited for a total bid price of $10,621,560 plus GST. And number 2, amend the 2018 to 2022 financial plan to include an additional $1.405 million for the water filtration plant project, with additional funding to come from the water reserves. Moved by Councillor Arnett, seconded by Councillor Friesenhan. Any discussion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at 2 things on page 17 with the cost breakdown. Furniture, $20,000. That seems like a lot for, there's just going to be an office up there, isn't there?
I'll put that through to staff.
So it's more than an office, so it's all the furniture within. So there's a lunchroom there, so it equips the entire lunchroom, the cabinets, all that sort of thing. So it's a pretty small budget,
so it's
actually.
more than furniture, if you're talking cabinets.
Yeah,
that kind of
and
stuff.
desks, operating desks, and that sort of things. It's not a big budget.
And on that, I'm having trouble trying to figure out existing contingency and proposed additional. Existing, that's already included in the budget.
Oh,
There's 2 of you.
I was gonna say.
Whoa.
I can hear myself. So when we went to tender, we included, it's not in the 10 point something million, but we had set a contingency budget of 1.5 million, and when we were last at council, I had indicated that we wanted to increase that budget to $2 million, so that so we'd have the ability to, you know, not to
Absorb
cover
any changes.
Yeah.
Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on, 4.2, Statement of Financial Information for the year ended December 31st, pages 19 through 72, and the recommendation is that Council approve the Statement of Financial Information for the Town of Ladysmith for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2017. Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Arnett. Discussion? Councillor Patterson.
Lost my poster though. We had U.S. City Bank is a payable. What is that?
Through to staff.
The U.S. Bank is just a name for our purchasing cards. It's actually run through the CIBC accounts, but it's just the name of the account that we run our purchasing cards through.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to 4.3, adjustments to water billing accounts, and the recommendation from staff is that council approve adjusting the water billing due to leaks for the following properties up to, and you'll see the property numbers there and the amounts but ranging between 4,621 to 3,236.
So move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Arnett. Discussion? Councillor Arnett.
Thank you, Mayor. So when this was first brought to our attention, there was some discussion, and the town has gone back and worked with these property owners, and we won't have a repeat situation with them, as I would expect.
I can't guarantee there will be no leaks, but they will not be qualifying for another adjustment in the future.
Very good.
Well, in the next 10 years.
They're incented. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Would it be appropriate to ask how many people are claiming up to the $3,000?
I can get you that information at a future meeting, but it's going to be under 10 properties.
And has it ever been considered just to limit it to 3,000 period and not bring extraneous amounts to council for consideration?
That is an option if council wishes to direct staff to amend the bylaw. We can easily do that.
I'll leave it just now.
Okay, so just as a comment, right now staff has the authority up to $3,000 to waive. Above 3,000 must come to council, but I just want to be clear that, and I'm not speaking to any specific, but I am talking to a specific incident in the past. The person had mobility issues, they weren't aware that they had a leak and were unable to tend to it themselves. So I think it's important that on extreme cases of high dollar values that it should come to council, and that we not just say, sorry, that's all you can get. Because if someone were to be impacted with a multi-$1,000 additional water bill, and it was because of some impediment that didn't allow them to do that, I would be concerned. I personally think that, you know, the threshold that we put in place, staff can make that determination, and then I'm comfortable with ones that go above that coming to council, but we can always bring that forward in the future. So we do have it moved. Oh, Councillor Friesenhand.
Just for clarification, that number represents going from the different stages, right? So we start off at so much per meter, and after so many meters, it's a higher rate and a higher rate again?
Correct. It would be what their bill would have been after the step system is in there.
If it was all at the lower rate, it would be a lot less?
The lowest rate, the base rate includes, I think 25 cubic meters. So yeah, that wouldn't really constitute much of a leak.
Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So item 5.1 was removed and referred to a future meeting. 5.2, Town of Ladysmith Community Center Facilities Fees and Charges Bylaw, pages 85 through 88. And the purpose of Bylaw 1968 is to establish updated community center and facilities fees and charges as previously approved by council. And the recommendation is that council gives first, second, and third readings to Town of Ladysmith Community Center and Facility Fees and Charges Bylaw 2018 number 1968. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Hutchins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to correspondence. Correspondence and petition regarding bylaw 1951, pages 89 through 150. The recommendation is that council receive the correspondence and petition regarding bylaw 1951, rezoning of a portion of lot 4 known as the Jewel. Moved by Councillor Hutchins, seconded by Councillor Arnett. Any discussion? Councillor Arnett.
The city manager will have to let me know whether I'm crossing the boundary around the public hearing.
Your worship, the public hearing is completed, so your wish is.
Yeah.
So with respect to these, this petition and the organization and hearing from people, Mayor, it's great. It's democracy in action. It does remind me a little bit of what happened to the ERP and the watershed, losing the watershed in the last election. But the feedback that I'm getting from folks that have spoken to me has, as I mentioned to a couple of you already, has been respectful. But I've heard from a number of people, and really the sticking point for some of them is it's nothing, none of it, but most of them it's the sense of 6-story apartment buildings. And I think I asked the question at the public hearing that although the waterfront plan is passed, each of those things, any development still has to come to the table for approval under the zoning when the development permit is the process starts. So we would have some control over the number of stories in the apartment building still, would we not?
Yes, and you know, for clarity as well, if you read the policy document, it does talk about protecting the view corridors. It was anticipated that the heights would be lower as it approached the closer to the water, and that is detailed in quite detail in the residential portion of the actual OCP documents that were part of the waterfront plan.
So the reason I raise that is that should I be sitting at the table when those things come forward, that would be the one piece that I would be really thinking about in terms of height ceilings, literally. But other than that, we've heard from a number of people who participated in the waterfront plan, and you know, we make our best judgments. So on this piece, I do actually think that the majority of people who've spoken to me are in the right place. I struggle with the thought of a 6-story apartment building as well, within the context that you're talking about. But other than that, that's all I have to say. So I think it's democracy in action. I think it's great.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So without any further hands up, I just want to say as well that it's absolutely okay to disagree with the outcomes of any kind of community planning process. I don't think that there's a single process that you could put forward that would get agreement. And when you see 30% on the final survey of the people going through the planning process with us disagreeing with the residential component as it was formatted in the plan, the expectation has to be that there'll be significant pushback. So for me, it was understood that a lot of folks would have difficulty with accepting that part of the plan, and I had no illusions that it would be otherwise. What's troubling to me is that there's been a lot of disinformation put out there to frighten people into signing the petition. Seeing names on there that I recognize, I reached out to 22 people that had signed the petition to ask them, you know, especially since we had a previous relationship, not necessarily friends, but good talking, speaking acquaintances that would come to me on other issues. Some of the feedback I got for the reason for signing the petition was concerning in that it was completely inaccurate. One person reported that they were told that all the arbutus trees were going to be cut down for condos when it's clear in the plan, the image of which is up there. The townhouse units are actually aligned on the existing roadway that is Oyster Bay Drive, and the trees that were being spoken about are actually preserved as park in the plan. The engagement itself was, I felt, really well promoted, because I know myself, among many other people that were involved, were so excited about the process that it wasn't something anybody was trying to hide. If anything, it was something that most people were shouting from the rooftops. I utilized my own social media, the town did, we used utility bill inserts. If you look at previous planning processes, there was more outreach toward driving a legitimate engagement than any plan before that. Now, there was some significant community planning processes in the past that were very successful, the sustainability plan, other previous engagements. But when we went through the process, the understanding was that the level of participation was very high, not just at the beginning, but throughout. And in fact, the release went out today that the process itself won an award for engagement from the the Planners Institute of British Columbia, which looks at how planning is done and completed, not only the output, but actually how the process was. So as much as I understand, and I don't disagree with the process of petitions, I will make another note that it says on the petition, and I quote, "I have been a resident elector of the town of Ladysmith for the past 30 days and am entitled to register as a non-resident property elector." But then the inspection of the names on here and the addresses, many are from Nanaimo, Yellow Point, not qualified electors under the definition provided in the document itself, which, you know, on the first 4 pages, 26 of the 72 names that are there are actually not resident electors of Ladysmith. So regarding all of that, when 30% of the people, if you extrapolate it to the amount of people that voted in the last election, that's several hundred people. And one wise person told me, the first person that told me to get involved in politics said to me that you would be doing an amazing job if you had 70% support. But think about what it means when 30% of the people in your town that you grew up in, you're not disconnected like you are when you're in provincial or federal government, but 30 people in your town would be against something. That would mean that you're still doing an excellent job, but that would mean that several hundred people in your own town are not happy with what you're doing. So when I look at this, I will take the petition at face value, but from my position, to defer the decision to a referendum or to step back from the amount of engagement that we had with people who really did invest in the plan, tried to understand the reasons, and took the time to look at it from a pragmatic point of view that everything is possible as long as everything is possible. To take away the main economic driver for the plan would make the whole other rest of the plan impossible. If we have a $20 million cleanup cost and the federal and provincial governments tell us we need to pay a third, where does that $7 million come from? Once that part is done, we have a park that is more than 4 times the existing size, when you take Transfer Beach Park into it, of the existing Transfer Beach Park. As we know from looking at our budgets, parks maintenance is one of the highest costs that we have as a municipal government. And yet the very same people that will complain to me annually about our property taxes are often the same people that don't want a project like this to go forward. Those residential units provide the economic base, not only to provide the maintenance, not only to provide the investment to do the remediation work, but they also provide a strong base of customers to a growing local economy. When I was elected, the #1 complaint was all the vacant storefronts downtown. And we fought really hard and worked extremely hard over the last few years to change the tide that was a dwindling, dying downtown to something that's getting reinvested in, and you see it every day. So as much as I know it's a very difficult decision, and having heard all of the rhetoric, most of it not quite truthful, but I will take it at face value that I've seen on Facebook and other social media, the aggressive campaigning from people being badgered when they say they don't want to sign a petition, all of that. Regardless of all of that, I'm still absolutely committed to the decision that we made as a council with the people that participated in the process, and happy to take whatever pushback that comes with that, because without some uncomfortable conversations, we don't get progress and we don't get change. So I'm still very happy to accept the petition, and I appreciate that the point of view of people will be that if it's with just your sensibilities and you don't want to see it happen, that's absolutely within your rights, but please do it based on facts, not on some angry rhetoric. Councillor Henderson.
My stance on this is that the vote that I made originally, I would stick with. I have full confidence that the numbers and the types of people that were involved with the plan were wholeheartedly aware of the community's need and desire to keep as much green space as possible, that opening up the area, changing what we can gradually of the old industrial contamination, and that I guess you'd have to say undesirable part of the waterfront, is not going to happen overnight, and that there are words that get people's desires inflamed, and I'm one of them. And in this case, I think there has been a lot of misunderstanding, but I think the heart of the people that signed this petition is in the right place, and that a conversation as opposed to opposition is better. And so I think that if anybody wants to really discuss what this is going to look like and the gradual steps that need to be taken, and taking into account that there is room to move on that 6 stories, is important. And anybody who has any kind of input into what the town does deserves to be heard.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we will go to Councillor Patterson. We're putting your new business on the next agenda. So we'll go to question period.
Robert Johnson, 526 First Avenue.
You're up.
I have 3 questions. I will allow anybody to jump between my first, second, or third questions. First question is, I appreciate the financial annual report that gives a statement of financial information, but usually around this time we also get a list of motions that were rise and report that were held in camera. When can we expect that annual list?
Put that through to staff. I don't know what the status is of that.
I find the title, Your Worship, but I don't have an answer.
Okay. Usually it does come around this time, but I know that I'd asked where this was, so they pushed to get this one on, so I think it'll be on an agenda soon.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question? Question number 2. At the public hearing, I asked about the appraisal of the land, if it had been done. And the question I have now is, has there been appraisal on the lots that we are in question, and the time frame in regards to selling them, and where will the proceeds for the sale go?
So are you talking about the southern portion of Lot 4, the rezoned area? I believe that staff will be coming forward with the final economic report quite soon to the implementation committee, which would then forward it along to council. I'd have to defer to staff, though, to see what the status is of that.
That is correct, Your Worship. We're currently working on that final assessment. It will be coming to the committee, and then the committee will recommend to council.
Yeah, so it should come to council sometime in the next month or so, but just to be clear, there's some differences there because it's not an actual subdivided lot, that it could be subdivided several different ways to look at different opportunities, whether it be phased, whether you want to do different, say, covenants on different lots so that you can control heights and setbacks and things like that. Those are the recommendations that a land economist, not necessarily an appraiser, would bring forward to the committee, who would then forward recommendations to council for consideration.
The one part of the question was, what are the plans for any proceeds from the sale?
Well, my understanding from all the direction that council has had so far is that that would be reinvested in the waterfront remediation and any amenities.
Waterfront, okay, very good, thank you. The third and last question is, what is council's policy regarding council members being accused of harassing or intimidating individual citizens who are peacefully asking their fellow citizens either for a petition either on private property, public streets, or in local businesses? What is the policy?
I'm not aware if there is a policy. I don't think we've ever had to consider that, but I would have to put that through to staff. Okay, so our CAO will find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Eva Vincent, 731 Colonia.
Hi.
Thank you for accepting the petition into your minutes. I do want to stress that of those 917 signatures before you, I have gone through them all. Yes, there are some. There are 796 that I estimate by looking at the map of Ladysmith that fall within the electorate area. So it's still a high percentage of people. I understand that there was engagement there was a lot of people that didn't have the opportunity to engage. Some of your family members, your friends, your neighbors, people that didn't know. I myself, although I engaged, wasn't aware that that was town property to be sold. So that's of concern to me, and that's why I guess I connected with other people, that voices that I'd heard. I know you want a question.
Yeah, thank you.
So what I'd like to say is a couple of things. What I haven't seen in reviewing everything, and I'll just stick my glasses on my head, is you mentioned you don't have an amount for the sale yet. You did mention having to come up with at least 7 million to...
I was making an example. We
Okay,
still
I
haven't
understand.
finalized the cost of remediation.
The remediation project is going to take a chunk.
Yes.
In all likelihood, that may be in excess of what the project will cost to remediate that. I'm not sure. I'm not the expert. What I'd like to know is what financial endeavors have been taken, what forecasting has been done to address the work that's going to be necessary, the amount of money it's going to cost. Has there been that accounting?
So
And what are the long-term plans for the maintenance of that piece?
absolutely. So the maintenance of which piece?
The waterfront plan.
So the public parcels or the private obviously would be responsibility
Right,
of
the
any.
public parcels.
Yeah.
You're talking about all
So
this extra
that's
area.
part of the implementation plan. So if you look in the actual waterfront plan, there's an implementation table in the back.
Right.
So year one, I believe, if you look at the table, a lot of the finer points on costing, they were only done at a high level.
Okay.
Those were provided in the Golder report, but depending on what is the remediation that is accepted by other levels of government, and then there would be certain engineering costs. We're having the discussions with other levels of government right now to get the funding from them to complete that study work. When you do an OCP, like for example Holland Creek or South Ladysmith area, that's not part of an OCP process, that's part of an implementation process, and that's the part that we're endeavoring on now.
So, and that, I saw that. I did look at that.
Yeah.
I note that you had a business plan for the first year.
Yeah.
And then in greater detail in the second to fifth year, I think.
Yeah.
So my concern is that property is going to be sold before a full review of what's going to be undertaken. We'll end up with 6-story condos and maybe not, maybe 4. But I do believe, and that'll be another question, before that is done, to find out what the actual feasibility, what the financial impact is going to be. And there's a greater impact. There's also the impact on the community. When that construction starts, how long is that going to be going on?
Thank
is
you.
it going to happen at night?
Yeah, so just to complete the circle on that first piece, any land sales that go through the town, that funds are held in the real property reserve. So those funds can't just be dispersed willy-nilly to other projects or sort of frittered away. So, and again, that doesn't, whatever subsequent councils do or the direction that they give can change anything. But if there are land sales in proceeds in advance of work expenditures that need to be done, they would be held in the real property reserve to be used when the time is appropriate.
And I understand that. My question was, if, let's just hypothetically say $7 million is netted from that property, and the project is going to cost you're spending $2.2 million just on the revitalization of the machine shop. So the whole plan has a huge financial implication.
Absolutely.
Has that been looked at? Where the money's coming on beyond the sale of that property?
Yeah, and I think I explained in that piece
I understand
that
you're going to keep that money and use it, but what about the other money? You're not going to get it all done for $7 million.
No, that's what the implementation plan talks about, contemplates moving forward from the adoption. You can't start the implementation until you've adopted the OCP portion, and that's been done.
Now, is everyone okay if I ask another question? Another question I have is, I know there are other landowners in that area. I thought there was more than there are. Have they been consulted, and are they on board with the implementation of this plan?
The property owners and tenants committee met throughout the process, and they were up until the adoption point. At some point when we enter the public hearing phase, then the sort of discussions go quiet so that we can follow legislative requirements around public hearings and that portion of it, the legislative part.
Okay. And I have one other thing that's a little unrelated to that, but very related. And when I look at the, just get the correct name of it here, the award for the water filtration contract. On the second page, it says of course, since the first budget went through, there's additional costs being realized, and that's fine. And it's saying that those funds are coming out of the water operating and capital reserves, and that by using these funds, future projects such as the Holland Dam storage project will be delayed. This is a grave concern as we continue to increase our population by a lot. And so I'm wondering if there is a plan to address this. If this and I understand that you have to go forward with the filtration and it's a VHA requirement and everything. And kudos to you for taking that on. I appreciate that being moved forward. But if you're depleting those other, you're probably not depleting them, but utilizing them. What is the timeline for looking at having our water increased when asset funds are being used to make the park pretty?
Yeah, so that's the next capital project on the infrastructure list. So I know that there was a grant application that was forwarded this year. The study work, I believe, to get a finer cost on that was budgeted for in this year. So once we have those, then we'll be moving to the next phase. So as has been seen in the last few years, we've been quite successful with the grants that we've received. The budget has contemplated parcel tax increases that would allow us to build that storage without significant grant funds, but as been seen in the past, when those grant funds are received, they greatly reduce that impact. So when you're using the reserves or the grant proceeds, that just decreases the amount of borrowing that's required. And for example, in residential developments, if it's a few $100s per parcel per year for water, and you add a few hundred parcels, then you're adding to the ability that you have to pay for debt to service that debt, to build more dams or do dredging, increase the water storage. So I think we'll get more detail on that as that engineering piece, the study piece that's going on this year, gets completed.
And is there a timeline to anticipate?
I'd have to put that through to staff.
It's in the 5-year capital plan, and the study that you're referring to is coming up this year.
Yeah. So the study should be completed this fiscal year, and then staff will bring back options to council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And just for one more moment of clarity, if I can.
So we've only got about 3 minutes left for question period. We do have another meeting.
I just do want to clarify, maybe I completely misunderstood, and Councillor Arnett, going back to your question and your concern about the 6 stories.
Just to be clear, the rules are that you have to address the questions to the chair, but I will ask Councillor Arnett.
So, well, and it's not actually directed to Councillor Arnett. I'm just referring to the fact of his concern. I understood at the meeting, unfortunately you weren't here, that when that question came up to Ms. Adams, she did state that council would have input into the design, but that the 6 stories was part of the bylaw, and therefore somebody could request that. And I'm wondering if I misunderstood that, so it would really be a question for city.
I put that through staff, but I wasn't here, so you'd have to clarify those comments. Sorry, I'm not aware of what we're...
Maybe I misunderstood.
Through to staff?
Your worship, question is for council, but
yeah.
I'll, if you want me, I can just find out and report back to you.
Well, so my understanding is that the parcel has not been subdivided. It's been rezoned, but it hasn't been subdivided. So that requires a PLA, which will come with different lots. When that is approved or put forward, there could be different conditions put on different lots within that piece of land that would talk about specific things like the setbacks, heights. Now keep in mind that the OCP itself does talk about anything over 4 stories, that the upper stories had to be stepped back from the face. Those are part of the OCP document. So if somebody came forward with a development that wasn't in line with the OCP points, they would have to actually request an amendment. So that would require a whole new public process to get those amendments made. If it fits within the OCP and the zoning that's been put on the property, then it's a development permit process. But when the subdivision of that comes up, covenants could be placed on, say, the lots at the front, for example, to maximize height and density, and then step back, for example. I know that was contemplated during the process, but that's as much detail as I can give you until we go through those steps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Turn the floor over to someone else.
Yeah. So we've got about a minute because we do need to recess before we have another meeting that's scheduled. So.
Rob Johnson, 526 First Avenue.
Yep.
Very quick question, just for clarification. In the 5-year financial plan, for 5 years, you have $400,000 per year allocated towards the waterfront plan.
Yep.
That's $2 million. Is that in addition to the money that's coming from the sale, or is that contemplating the sale.
So that money is just budgeted in the plan out of the real property reserve as it sits today, but any funds from sale would go to raise the real property reserve. Thanks. All right. All right, so we'll get a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hutchins and Patterson, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Now we play musical chairs.